A very good evening to you this World Food Day, where the world is saying zero to hunger by 2030 is possible. I am Karari John Wambugu, ready to bring you up to speed with all news creating waves across the globe. And as you know, we are all about business. Here's a glance of all news making headlines in the business world. Nutrition Africa Investor Forum, all hands on deck towards a well-fed nation.
You have got two people here.
For the annual Tax Summit 2018, charity begins at home.
The local resource mobilization, what we talked about is from the revenues that...
National Health Financing Dialogue, time to wave the donor goodbye. On this World Food Day, Gain Africa, together with other partners, organized Nutrition Africa Investor Forum, a consultative engagement with small and medium enterprises as key stakeholders in scaling up nutrition. As the world moves towards zero hunger by 2030, Kenya wants to fast-track these efforts through attainment of food security, a pillar of the Big Four agenda by the government. I was at the event, and here is the story. Take a look. The World Food Day is celebrated every year around the world on 16th October in honor of the date of the founding of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in 1945, with this year's theme being Our Action Are Our Future. The day coincides with the Nutrition Africa Investor Forum in Nairobi today, where it brought together SME stakeholders to deliberate on ways on fighting malnutrition in Africa. The forum, which was sponsored by the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, Royal DSM, Scaling Up Nutrition and African Business, brought together stakeholders from around the continent. The keynote speaker, the former president of Tanzania and the chairman of Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete Foundation, His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete, started off by painting a sad truth of the state of malnutrition in Africa.
According to WHO African Nutrition Report 2017, undernutrition is still persistent in the continent, and the number of stunted children has increased. Within Africa, 25 of the 54 countries have stunting rates ranging between high, when they say high is over 30%, and very high, about 40%. If you have 25 countries of the 54, it's almost over half of the countries have this problem. That's too much. Analysis of trends, of future trends, presents a worrisome picture. It is projected that these rates are likely to increase instead of falling, or thus complicating efforts aimed at reducing the number of stunted children as directed by the SDGs.
The former Tanzanian president pointed out how good nutrition translates to an economic benefit for the country.
But also there is the factor of increased economic productivity. A healthy population is definitely more productive than a sick population. But it saves lives of women and children. Many lives are lost due to nutrition-related problems. If we can really ensure that there is proper nutrition for children and women, many lives will be saved. Again, it's an added benefit to the nation.
He then challenged the SMEs and the government to play their individual and collective role in fighting malnutrition.
But I believe they can do more. They can do better. in the food value chain. They can get involved in agricultural production. They can do fishing. They can do food processing. They can do food fortification. But they can also get involved in trading in food and nutrition products.
Speaking on behalf of the government, Head of Nutrition and Dietetics Services, Ministry of Health, Veronica Kirogo, highlighted the steps the government is taking to strengthen the fight against malnutrition.
We are currently developing our National Nutrition Action Plan 2018 to 2022, where we are having 18 key results area, both from the nutrition sensitive and nutrition specific interventions. And last month, we actually engaged the private sector in Kenya so that they can identify what are the opportunities in this nutrition action plan where they can play in the next 5 years.
As the world marks World Food Day, the Nutrition Africa Investor Forum is a step to zero hunger and fighting malnutrition in Africa, as the high burden of malnutrition threatens the future of the continent. Reporting for BrandPlus TV, I am Karari John Wambugu. Disability, though is a significant issue, is often ignored. 15% of the world population has a disability, and the most affected are children below the age of 17 years. The Development Pathway, in partnership with World Food Programme and UNICEF, today held a conference at Crown Plaza on building disability-inclusive social protection system. Our reporter Daisy Wambua was at the event and filed the following report.
Social protection consists of policies and programs which are designed to reduce poverty and accountability by promoting efficient labor markets, diminishing people's exposure to risks, and enhancing their capacity to manage economic and social risks such as unemployment, exclusion, sickness, disability, and old age. Dr. Stephen Kidd, a world-leading social policy expert, in his keynote address noted that poverty and disability are interlinked.
You know, you're more likely if you have a disability to be living in poverty, but if you're living in poverty, you're more likely to have a disability as well. You don't have the proper diet, you live in less healthy conditions, and you're more likely to fall susceptible if you don't get vaccinations. As we've heard already, a couple of stories of children getting polio because there isn't the right vaccinations in place. And they're inextricably linked. We have to eradicate poverty, but we also have to give as much support as we can to people with disabilities.
He continued to encourage the government to invest in the people living with disabilities as they possess a wealth of talents which are of importance in improving the gross domestic product.
A recent study a few years ago showed around middle-income countries that the losses of productivity of not investing in people with disabilities can actually reach around 7% of GDP. It's a massive loss that countries lose by not having proper investment.
In attendance was the Senator and Chair of the Kenya Disability Parliamentary Committee of the Albinism Society of Kenya, Isaac Mwaura, who pointed out the need to invest in universal healthcare coverage to avoid financial strain when seeking medical evaluation and in turn reduce the dependency on social welfare and communities.
It's very clear that we need to invest in universal coverage so that we don't leave anyone behind. In any case, we are talking about 0.11% of our GDP, which is translating to 12 billion shillings. Currently, our national budget is at 3.1 trillion. So this is really a drop in the ocean, yet it would go a long way with regards to reducing the dependency burden on social welfare and communities.
He continued to say that the people living with disabilities are not valued in the country and are seen as not deserving because they do not contribute much in the economy.
The problem, moderator, in this country is that persons with disabilities are seen as undeserving. That is the problem. They don't deserve anything. And when you are giving them too much. In any case, what is their level of productivity? Of what benefit is it to invest in persons with disabilities? That is the biggest challenge ever.
The Chief Social Policy UNICEF Kenya, Ousmane Niang, was at the conference, and he spoke on the need for the government, in partnership with various stakeholders, to come up with a database that can keep disability statistics and have evidence to help monitor their progress.
That is the role of international organizations who are working daily with government, like how we can come up with strong disability statistics. Because at least when we go to parliaments, when we go to the Senate, when we go to all decision making, at least we have something tangible that we can show, like, this is the problem, this is how it stands, this is how it is happening.
He continued to point out that the only way to solve the disability problem is by using the human rights-based approach, as it involves everyone, leaving no one behind.
We can only address disability using a human rights-based approach. Human rights-based approach. And I think for those who know the Sustainable Development Goal, it is built under human rights-based approach, which is like we have to leave no one behind.
The research presented identified how social protection can enable persons with disabilities to overcome barriers they face, including the higher cost of living and inadequate incomes. If the country is to move into a middle-income economy, no one should be left behind because they suffer from a disability. No efforts should be spared in including them in all social protection systems. For BrandPlus TV Business News, I am Daisy Wambua.
With Trumpism taking shape faster than anyone thought and anti-globalization on the rise, Africa needs to rethink its revenue earning strategies. For this reason, day one of the 4th Annual Tax Summit saw relevant industry stakeholders discuss ways and means Africa can achieve these key, among them being expanding revenue base through a robust intra-Africa trade.
Both Commissioner Mohammed and Grace Wandera are there. So I'm very proud.
While the rest of the world is busy trading with itself, Africa still lags behind in intra-Africa trade. It is only with the newly signed Continental Free Trade Area Agreement that the tides of change are beginning to blow in our direction. Ambassador Erastus Monche, chairperson Capacity Building Foundation, a key speaker at the event, noted that intra-Africa trade is the next market frontier for the continent.
For Africa now, the first thing that we need to do is get together. And I think our leaders are showing the way, in the sense that beginning of this year, we've now launched the Continental Free Trade Area. We have given ourselves 1 year to realize it. And once we realize it, we will bring more trade within ourselves. On signing the intra-African trade itself, when it comes into force, an additional of almost $16 billion just by that signature. Then, of course, the dynamics of it. We'll see investment coming. We'll see us processing more of our raw materials and commodities that we export at the moment. And we'll also see bigger employment to the economy. And we'll also see more taxes, which, after all, is what we are talking about here.
Sorry, since we only have just...
However, as much as intra-Africa trade is being drummed as the next revenue base for the continent, Sachin Gudkar, chairperson Kenya Association of Manufacturers, pointed out that there are a myriad of challenges that continue to dog the continent's trade landscape, thus slowing down or altogether bringing to a halt intra-Africa trade.
Essentially, we need to get alignment at country level on the importance of trade blocks. So what you cannot, what keeps on happening is you've got various trade spats on, for example, say industrial sugar goods being exported to Tanzania, lubricants being exported, cigarettes being exported, labels, and motor vehicles. So there are 5 or 6 sectors which are impacted by the current trade barriers with Tanzania. Kenya is also putting in trade measures against Tanzania because of the issues being faced. So how do we get out of this spiral, and what do we need to do to elevate both our economy? Because trade is not a zero-sum game. Both sides can win. And we need to get back to a situation where both sides are trading properly and happily. Kenya is the second biggest investor in Tanzania, by the way. The cost of energy is too high and unsustainable for manufacturing and business to thrive. What we need to do is bring in a pretty strong roadmap to bring power costs down from 16-17 US cents per kilowatt hour to about 9 US cents per kilowatt hour. We're trying to do that by changing the energy mix. However, we're still tied into some pretty long-term agreements whereby we're paying quite a lot of high power costs, especially to the thermal generators. Until those agreements expire, we will not really be able to bring that cost down. However, we can work creatively and bring the costs of power down, and Kenya Association of Manufacturers will present a roadmap to government for bringing power costs down.
Thank you very much, Sachin. Now,
For Africa to fully leverage on the fiscal potential of intra-African trade, Dr. Caesar Mwangi, Chairman Kenya Markets Trust, emphasized that key systems must be streamlined, not just in the country but throughout the continent.
Why is Japan so successful in its trade? And as I said, Japan's GDP, at least in 2016, I'm aware it was approximately $5 trillion US dollars, while Africa's GDP was approximately 2.5, half of that. I mean, it is a shame for 55 countries to produce half of what one small country is producing. When I examined this particular case, what I realized, Japan was focused on their values. Okay? Japanese values are very clear on hard work. Japanese values are very clear on innovation and continuous improvement. That is called Kaizen. And Japanese values are very clear on honesty. Right? So, Japanese are not greedy. They say we need to improve, we need to do better, and it is a value. And I think where Africa has failed is in its value system. Okay? Where Africa has got what I call short-term thinking. Africa has got showmanship at the leadership level and does not have a hard work mentality. It has a deal-making mentality. Dubai is a very small state. It hardly has 2 million people. But they decided in the 70s, because we cannot compete in the pearl fishing trade. You know, there used to be it was a pearl fishing colony. Eh? And when the Japanese started producing pearls, culturing pearls in ponds, the price of pearls dropped. So the people, the rulers of Dubai realized we have to find something else. They said the only advantage we have is our location as a port. So let us make this a trade hub for the rest of the world. And they created the right policies. Now, the first policy that they had was, we're not too many of us, so how can we attract investors to our hub? Okay? So they made it a very low tax haven. They made it a place where people don't pay much tax, but they're encouraged to come and invest there. And they prefer to earn a little from many people rather than a large percentage from a few people. I think in this country, we seem to focus on the very few producers. I think we only have 3.8 million people on iTax, out of a population of 45 million, almost 50 million. Now, it is better if we earn less on 15 million people rather than earning a large percentage on a few people. We'll be much better off.
Trade within a given continent is not a new concept in the business world. Europe's percentage stands at 71, Asia is at 51, but Africa stands at a dismal 16%. With the continent constantly borrowing more and more and increasing its dependence on foreign aid, the only way out is to trade within itself to expand the revenue base.
The owner of KCM 344J, you give the lights up.
Welcome back to BrandPlus TV Business News. Now, Kenya has played host to a number of refugees and asylum seekers around the region, making her the second biggest refugee hosting country in Africa after Ethiopia. To this regard, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights Kenya organized a regional conference, Human Rights in Migration Governance, to address the violation on human rights of immigrants. I was at the event, and here are the details. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is a constitutional body with the sole mandate of ensuring the promotion and protection of human rights in Kenya. Better Migration Management Program is to provide migration management in the Eastern African region, and the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights provides the better migration management with a strong partnership opportunities in embedding the migration and human rights agenda in Kenya, regionally and internationally. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights chairperson, Kagwiria Mbogori, pointed out that Kenya is a regional hub and a home for migrants.
A reflection of Kenya's positioning in terms of migration shows that Kenya is a regional hub and a regional hub for regular and irregular migration. Current statistics published by the IOM, International Organization for Migration, and the United States in its Trafficking in Persons report, as well as statistics published by the Danish Refugee Council under Kenya's country profile of 2016, point to the fact that Kenya is a country of origin. It is also a country of transit and a destination to both regular and irregular immigrants. So we are in the whole mix.
I have to introduce to you our first speaker.
She went ahead to urge Kenyan government and her counterpart in the Horn of Africa to engage on human rights issues pertaining migration governance.
On the other hand, according to United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA, 2017 figures, it is estimated that 258 million people live in a country other than the country of their birth. It is therefore timely for Kenya and the Horn of Africa to engage in this discussion on how human rights principles can or should influence migration governance.
The GCM has increasingly become...
The chairperson went ahead to reiterate that the migration can contribute positively to the development of a nation as opposed to being seen as a threat.
In most instances, discussions about migration tend to be focused on migrants' economic contribution and security. Sometimes the focus is on migrants' lack of economic contribution. Rarely do we appreciate that migrants do influence not only the economic development of a country, but also the political, social, and cultural makeup of a country. This calls for comprehensive discussion on how migration impacts a country and how best to safeguard human rights and spur positive and substantial development.
Of human rights in migration.
The Ministry of Interior and Coordination of the National Government, Deputy Director of Immigration Services, Eunice Lamba, stated that the Kenyan Constitution and her governing laws does protect the rights of every person.
Distinguished delegates, all countries represented here have legislations that are dealing with human rights in their national laws and various aspects. The Kenya Constitution 2010, Chapter 4, states that every person is equal before the law and shall enjoy equal protection by the law. Indeed, all persons have the right to full enjoyment of essential human rights, fundamental freedoms, including the right to equal political, economic, social, and cultural opportunities. As we all know, human rights obligations are those that states have undertaken by signing treaties, which are then ratified by national parliaments and enacted through changing the state's practices. It is the role of states and non-state actors to ensure that human rights are at the center of efforts to address migration in all phases.
Migrants are often faced with human rights violations in the course of their journey, and this violation against migrants not only hurt the individual, but it hinders the nation from realizing their full economic potential. With the country having experienced positive economic growth and becoming a lower middle-income country, it is now progressively moving from external donor financing for health and venturing into domestic funding. As such, various stakeholders in the health sector today at Crown Plaza held a high-level national health financing dialogue and focused on the implementation of the health sector domestic financing sustainability plan. Our reporter Daisy Wambua was part of the dialogue and brings to us the following deliberations.
In a country with less than 5% health insurance penetration, healthcare financing is integral to the Universal Healthcare Discourse. In attendance was Sabina Chege, the women representative Murang'a County, who, while speaking to the press, stated that the meeting had brought together the various stakeholders in the health sector to discuss the measures to be taken to ensure universal healthcare is attained, as well as to pledge their continued commitment and support to the ministry to achieve its goal of making healthcare affordable to its citizens.
In order to achieve HC, we must work together and move together as a team. There were various issues that have been raised. There were 5 points that were raised by the PS of health. But basically, it's a commitment from each and every sector, from the private sector, from the legislatures, from the Ministry of Health, and also from the global partners that are currently in Kenya. But part of maybe what I've picked is that we need commitment. We need to start looking at the way we compete to deliver service delivery to the health sector rather than competing for resources.
The potential that is.
She continued to urge the county governments to allocate 15% of their county budgets to the healthcare sector and to stop using the money given for the healthcare sector by the government for other non-health related programs.
My priority and the committee priority is reinforcing the resources that we currently have. Currently, the money that we give to the counties don't have a specific percentage that they give to the healthcare. And taking in mind that health is devolved, all counties should at least have 15% of their allocation going to health. That is not happening. Actually, we don't have any of the county allocating a specific amount. I didn't just do it haphazardly. Secondly, the money that comes from the national government, like through NHIF, through the Linda Mama programs, it is put in a common county account. And so what happens, it depends on what is the governor would find fit for that money to be used. A lot of that money is being used for roads and other things and not reinvested back in health. So we are saying the money that is coming from health sector, be it from the national government and even what is collected within the hospitals and dispensaries or the health centers, that money should be reinvested back to health.
According to Dr. Nduku Kilonzo, the Executive Director of the National AIDS Control Council of Kenya, it is important for the resources used to be locally sourced because as a country we need to be certain that our healthcare is guaranteed.
In the current space of development assistance, it is very uncertain and there isn't really clarity on how far the resources will go, how long they will last, how much of it will last, and so we really must plan, not recognizing that those resources are neither guaranteed and we don't know for how long. And so that is one of the other reasons why it is so important. And really, I think it's also about recognizing that we are moving from being a lower middle-income country into a middle-income country, and which also has implications, more or less development assistance. We have more needs for health. We have more young people who are entering healthcare. So all of those things fundamentally mean that we must think about sustainability and availability of resources in the long term.
Speaking to Dr. Walter Ombita, the Director, Kenya Healthcare Federation, he was quick to point out the role of the private sector in financing healthcare.
There are many avenues that the private sector would finance healthcare. One is through insurance, so payment of premiums, and you're able to provide those who have covered with healthcare. there's reimbursement of services offered by healthcare providers through insurers. So you'll have, once a service is offered at the healthcare facility, then the private insurers can be able to pay for the services either through capitation or through fee-for-service or through packaged finance options. There is the avenue from the supply side where you have private sector owning healthcare facilities and they are able to directly finance the business and be able to offer the service to the people who come and access care. So there's both sides, from the demand side and the supply side, that but the private sector does finance healthcare.
For the country to attain universal healthcare and to safeguard it, there is need to increase domestic resources as a way to mitigate against global financing transitions and uncertainties of development assistance. For BrandPlus TV Business News, I am Daisy Wambua.
On that note, let us take a look on how the market performed today. Here is the summary. That is just a summary on how the market performed. But for a more in-depth analysis of the financial markets, tune in tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for my next big bet with Rachel Nderito and Karanja Daniel. Now let's take a look at the weather report. That was it from our business news desk tonight. But do make sure to tune in at 9 p.m. tomorrow for a fresh serving of news making headlines in the business world. Have a good night.